Welcome back to my animal education series. Today we're here in England. Well, not really, we're actually on Scott Air Force Base, but it has very English style weather today, so it really fits our interview. So let's start off with this interview, but can you introduce yourself and tell us how long you've been working at the Whipsnade Zoo?
Hi there, my name is Holly Bestley and I am one of the senior learning officers up here at ZSL Whipsnade Zoo over in the United Kingdom. And you join me today at our Wolverine enclosure, who we're going to be talking a little bit more about. Just to give you a little bit of background on who we are, ZSL Whipsnade Zoo is run by ZSL, who are the Zoological Society of London. They are the charity that run both London Zoo and Whipsnade Zoo here in the UK, as well as having the Institute of Zoology full of scientists who are researching various different animals and the threats they're facing around the world. And we've also got people working in lots of countries across the globe to conserve animals in their natural habitats out there. I've been working at ZSL for about 5 years, and I currently, in my current role, usually in non-COVID times, run all of the workshops and courses for young people visiting ZSL Whipsnade Zoo.
What countries can you find Wolverines in?
So we're talking about Wolverines today. This is our Wolverine enclosure here behind me. It spans all the way around that way there. We've got two just here perched on the log behind me. We have 3 Wolverine here at Whipsnade Zoo. We have Puff and Fee, dad and mum, and then their youngster Helga as well, who hopefully will pop out and see us a bit later today as well. They may look like a small bear, but they're actually a member of the weasel family, the mustelids. That's who these guys are. And you can find them usually in kind of remote, cold boreal forests in the northern hemisphere, kind of on the edge of the Arctic Circle. So places all around the top of the world, really, from kind of North Russia and China and Mongolia right round to North America and Canada.
What kind of environment do the Wolverines prefer?
Any way that you get kind of cold, tundra, taiga, that kind of habitat.
What animals are the Wolverines most closely related to?
So these guys are the largest of the weasel family, of the mustelid group.
These animals are stocky and very muscular. And what kind of other adaptations do these Wolverines have to survive in such a harsh environment?
And they are, obviously, you can see they're quite muscular. They're very well known for being quite ferocious as well. In terms of adaptations for that habitat, they've got a thick, kind of dense, oily coat, which keeps them nice and waterproof and also nice and warm in those harsh conditions that they call their homes. They've got very quite large paws, 5-toed feet that are very good for walking around on the snow out there. And also on each of those toes they've got lovely long claws as well, because these guys are fantastic climbers. So obviously they live in forested habitats. They're very, very good at climbing trees. They've been known to kind of wait at the top of trees and ambush prey as they walk past. It's a great thing they can do. They have a special upper molar as well that they use to feed on carrion, to crunch through those bones. And the coolest thing I think about Wolverine in terms of their adaptations is that when they are born, they are white, not brown like these guys, and that's to keep them nice and camouflaged in the snowy habitat that they call their home as well, and so they won't turn brown until they get a little bit older. And I've got some footage I can share with you guys of our kits when they were little, because Helga and Freya, who moved on to a different zoo recently, they were born here at Whipsnade Zoo, and about a year and a half ago, early 2019 they were born, and so we saw them in all their beautiful white furred glory.
And doing my research and watching videos and shows about these Wolverines, they seem to be very aggressive animals. So what kind of animals would fall prey to the Wolverine?
You are right, these guys are aggressive and bold. They are very, very tenacious animals, but they're not just carnivores, they are omnivores. So in the wild they would eat a whole range of things. In the summer months they might kind of eat things like plants and berries and things like that. They'd eat eggs, but their main part of their diet would be meat. They're kind of opportunistic, so they would eat anything they can get their hands on. So they would hunt smaller things like rodents and rabbits, but they would also feed on carrion, so dead larger animals, elk, caribou, things like that, and also they would feed on the kind of remains left by other larger carnivores in their home habitat as well, anything that they could kind of get their hands on. It has apparently been seen that if one of these guys approaches even a bear, whilst it's feeding, sometimes the bear will back off because these guys are quite so ferocious. And they have been known to attack larger animals themselves if those larger animals are vulnerable or injured in some way. So one single Wolverine can bring down a reindeer or caribou if it tries hard enough and if that reindeer is a little bit compromised. Anything they don't eat, they'll bury in the snow and then eat it at a later date.
How is your zoo working to emulate the Wolverine's natural environment and to provide enrichment for these animals?
Here at the zoo, we feed them a whole mix of things. We try and kind of replicate that varied wild diet. So they'll get things, depends on the day. Sometimes they get full carcass feeds, where they'll get a whole kind of animal as if it's been kind of left out for them. So they'll attack that as a group. Sometimes they'll get smaller meat feeds, and they'll also, we try and feed them some berries sometimes to try and stimulate that part of their diet. They get eggs, peas, sprats, small fish, things like that. But they don't really tend to like the berries so much yet. They haven't quite figured out that's something they're supposed to eat. They love, in the summer months when it was really hot, we also give them frozen blood to try and keep them nice and cool, and that's something that they quite enjoyed getting. So yeah, they get a really varied diet here at Whipsnade.
What other animals would try to prey on a Wolverine?
So because of the ferociousness of these guys, they have a few predators in the wild. Mountain lions, wolves, bears, things like that could prey on these guys, but the main predator of these guys over the years has been humans. Hunting them for their fur, things like that is decreased in recent years, but it is something that has been known and has kind of led to their decline over the years.
What are the distinct differences between the Eurasian and the North American Wolverine species?
Some authors do recognise two distinct subspecies of Wolverine between the Eurasian Wolverine and the North American Wolverine, but it's a big dispute amongst taxonomists about what the differences are, other than just kind of geographical differences and genetic differences. So there's not much noticeable differences between the two. Sometimes that the hunting strategies are slightly different because the habitats they are in are slightly different, but it's not anything that's hugely noticeable.
During my research, I also discovered that Wolverines are primarily solitary animals. How do they go about finding each other for breeding?
These guys are a solitary species. They're very territorial, so males in the wild will scent mark their entire area so that they can sort of warn the other males to stay away. But the females, they'll probably cross over, multiple females will cross over into the male's habitat, and that's how they can find each other when it's time to mate. They tend to form kind of long-term relationships in the wild with a number of females, so a single male to kind of maybe 2 or 3 females that all live in the same territory.
How long is the gestation period for a Wolverine, and about how large is their litter?
Those females will have a litter maybe every 1 to 2 years, and the gestation period is kind of just under 2 months, but it's a bit of a tricky one because they can delay implantation of the embryo. So if the embryo, they can delay implantation of the embryo, which will delay when those kits are born. So if there's scarce food around and they want to wait a bit until kind of the springtime when food will be in abundance, then they can do that so that they can delay when that kit is born.
While living in a harsh environment with other apex predators, about how long does a Wolverine live in the wild and then in captivity?
In the wild, they could live to be around 13 years old, whereas in captivity they've been known to surpass 20 years due to kind of the lack of predation, the lack of diseases, the health care and things like that they would get here in the zoo situation.
How do these Wolverines arrive at your zoo?
Our Wolverines that we have here at Whipsnade, Puff and Fee, came to us from other collections, and Helga was born here at the zoo a couple of years ago.
What is the IUCN status of Wolverines in North America and in Eurasia?
Wolverine are currently least concern on the IUCN Red List, but their numbers globally are decreasing. Historically, this has been due to the hunting of them for their coats, but is also down to habitat destruction as well. As they're so territorial, they live in quite small densities. You need kind of a huge expanse of habitat in order to support a large population of these guys, and so they can be quite susceptible to the habitat destruction. They're quite impacted by that threat that is obviously impacting species across the world at the moment.
Were Wolverines ever native to the United Kingdom?
It is believed that wolverines did once live in the UK, and they think around 6,000 years BC, back when things like wolves and lynx and bears were all found across the British Isles. So they kind of are potentially a previously native species here to the UK. There's obviously lots of talk in the UK at the moment about rewilding different animals and reintroducing things that used to live here. The lynx has been a big topic of discussion over the last few years. No one has yet suggested Wolverine, but maybe one day in the future, who knows?
Why is it important for facilities such as yourself and other zoos around the world to educate people about animal conservation?
In terms of educating people on the importance of these animals, obviously species around the world are in a bit of a terrible plight. We're currently in the 6th great mass extinction, we believe, that's mainly driven by human actions, and so people can't even start to help us conserve these animals unless they know about them. So that's why it's so important that we have them here in our zoo so people can come and see them. A lot of people won't have seen a wolverine before. We find that people don't often know what they look like. They don't think that they're anything other than an X-Man character. So we do really enjoy being able to showcase these beautiful species, and they are one of my favourite animals here at the zoo, just because they are quite so tenacious and feisty.
Before we close off, is there anything else that you want to tell us?
We do hope that if any of you are ever in the UK, you do come and visit us. We have an incredible array of species here at Whipsnade, many endangered species, a number of species that are extinct in the wild completely, that only exist because they have existed within zoo populations, and so they're definitely worth coming to look at, and having a little look on our website to find out more about them. If you just go to zsl.org, you can find out all about the different animals that we have and that we are working to conserve around the world at the moment.
Thank you so much for another awesome virtual interview. It was really cool to do one from England, and I've never had the opportunity to go to England. And I just think wolverines are such awesome animals. But anyway, thank you again for another awesome interview. And thank you guys for watching this week's video. Don't forget to leave a big thumbs up down below, subscribe to my channel, and as always, I'll see you next week.